not a ton of nerves. Just like get out there, run around. It's going to be probably a little sloppy here and there for both teams. That's kind of what preseason games are about. You give everybody some run, you figure out what lineups work, what don't, and everybody's just trying to get their footing again. And the same goes for me too. So I think obviously can rely on the USA basketball stuff that I did.
She made a franchise worth $500 million. Her paycheck? She had to work 200 years to match what an NBA rookie makes in one season. Let that number sit for a second, because this isn't a story about basketball anymore. This is a story about value. Who creates it, who captures it, and who gets left behind while everyone else cashes in. 2 years ago, the Indiana Fever were a punchline, not a bad team, not a struggling team, a punchline, a 5-31 record, 7 straight years without a playoff appearance, a franchise valuation sitting at $90 million, in a league where that number was already considered embarrassing. Sponsors weren't calling, fans weren't showing up. The Fever were the team you forgot existed until the draft lottery reminded you. Then came April 15th, 2024, the WNBA draft. And with the first overall pick, as if the universe had decided it was time, the Indiana Fever selected Caitlin Clark. Here's what you need to understand about Caitlin Clark before we go any further. She wasn't just the best player in college basketball. She was the best player in the history of college basketball, men's or women's. The all-time leading scorer in NCAA history. Full stop. She sold out arenas in Des Moines, Iowa, in the middle of February. She made people who had never watched a women's basketball game download ESPN just to see what the fuss was about. She didn't just play the game. She changed what the game meant to people. And when she went pro, the entire WNBA held its breath. Could she actually do it at the next level? Could the gravity she carried in college survive the translation to the pros? The skeptics were loud. The doubters had their spreadsheets ready. History said it had never been done quite like this. One player, one team, one moment flipping an entire franchise's worth overnight. History was about to get rewritten. In her rookie season, Clark broke merchandise records league-wide. Tickets to Fever games became the hardest to get in women's sports. TV ratings didn't just tick up, they surged. National networks started bidding for games. Sponsors who had been ignoring the WNBA for years suddenly had urgent meetings to schedule. The Fever didn't just improve on the court. They became must-see television. And then came 2025. Clark went down with an injury, missed 70% of the season. By every law of sports economics, the momentum should have evaporated. The ratings should have dipped. The merch should have slowed. Instead, merchandise sales went up 60%. Read that again. The star was on the bench, and the business got bigger. That is not a player boosting a franchise. That is a player who became something larger than a franchise, a cultural force that keeps moving even when she can't. Fast forward to today. Forbes and Sportico have just released the 2026 WNBA franchise valuations. The Indiana Fever are worth $560 million, third in the entire league. From $90 million to $560 million in 2 years. That's not growth. That's transformation. And yet, pull out your calculator and look at what Caitlin Clark actually earns. In 2024, on her rookie contract, she made $76,000. In 2025, with her extension, that number climbed, but it's still a fraction of what male athletes at her level command. The franchise she built is worth $500 million. Her cut of that? Almost nothing. So here's the question that nobody in the league offices want to answer out loud. If Caitlin Clark is the single biggest reason the WNBA is having its most valuable era in history, why is she the one person in this story who isn't getting paid like it? That answer is more complicated, more uncomfortable, and more important than most people realize. And it starts with understanding exactly how WNBA contracts work, and why the system was built in a way that was never designed for someone like her to exist. Let's talk about a number that will make your jaw drop. In 2024, the NBA's rookie salary minimum, the floor, the absolute least a team can pay a brand new player, was $1.1 million. Caitlin Clark's rookie salary in the WNBA, $76,151. Same sport, different league, a gap so wide it doesn't even feel like comparison anymore. It feels like a different universe. And here's the part that makes it worse. That number was an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was a system working exactly as designed. To understand why Caitlin Clark earns what she earns, you have to understand how the WNBA collective bargaining agreement works, and why it was built for a league that no longer exists. The CBA is the contract between the WNBA and its players. It sets salary caps, rookie scales, max contracts, and revenue splits. The current deal was signed in 2020, and at the time, it was called historic. It raised salaries. It added benefits. It was a genuine step forward, but it was designed for a league generating around $60 million in annual revenue. That's not the league Caitlin Clark plays in anymore. By 2025, WNBA revenue had exploded. TV deals expanded. Ticket sales surged. Merchandise records shattered year after year. The league's total franchise values crossed $5 billion. A media rights deal worth over $2 billion over multiple years was signed, a number that would have seemed like science fiction 5 years ago. The money changed. The contracts didn't. Here's how the rookie scale works in practice. When Clark was drafted first overall in 2024, she slotted into the WNBA's rookie wage scale. That scale is set. No negotiation, no bidding war, no leverage. You take the number or you don't play. In the NBA, a first overall pick commands a contract worth $10 to $12 million in the first year alone, with guaranteed raises built in. The market sets the price. The star's value is reflected immediately. In the WNBA, the market doesn't set the price. The CBA sets the price. And the CBA was written before anyone could have predicted that one player would single-handedly move the financial needle of the entire league. Clark played her rookie season for $76,151. To put that in perspective, that is less than the league minimum salary for a player on a two-way NBA contract. It's roughly what a mid-level accountant earns in a mid-sized American city. It is, by any reasonable measure, not a number that reflects the economic value she was generating. Now, to be fair, and this is important, Clark isn't making $76,000 a year total. Not even close. Nike signed her to a reported 8-year deal worth around $28 million. She has endorsement partnerships with Gatorade, State Farm, Hy-Vee, and others. Her total annual earnings from endorsements likely puts her well into the millions. And that matters. It's real money. It's life-changing money by almost any standard. But here's the catch. None of that endorsement money, not a single dollar, comes back to the WNBA. It doesn't boost her teammates' salaries. It doesn't flow into the league's revenue pool. It doesn't pressure the CBA to reflect her actual market value. Nike captures it. Clark captures some of it. The system stays exactly the same. The franchise she plays for is worth $560 million. The league she plays in just signed a $2 billion TV deal. And her basketball salary, the thing she gets paid to actually play, is almost symbolic. So who benefits most from all of this? The owners do. The television networks do. The sponsors circling the league do. The NBA, which owns a stake in the WNBA's success, does. And this is where the story stops being about basketball and starts being about power, because the next CBA negotiation is coming. And for the first time in the history of women's professional basketball, the players are sitting down at that table with something they've never had before. Leverage. Real, undeniable, billion-dollar leverage. And the question isn't whether the players will use it. The question is whether the owners are ready for what happens when they do. Before we talk about what's coming next, we need to talk about what came before. Because the WNBA didn't just appear in a vacuum, and the pay gap Caitlin Clark is living inside right now didn't just happen by accident. It was inherited from a century of decisions, structures, and assumptions that were never designed with women athletes in mind. And if you don't understand that history, you can't understand why fixing this is so much harder than it looks. Women's professional sports leagues have a graveyard. The American Basketball League, the WNBA's direct predecessor, launched in 1996 with genuine ambition, better salaries than anything women had seen before, a longer season, a more competitive product. For 2 years, it worked. Attendance was solid. The talent was real. Then the WNBA launched in 1997, backed by the full financial and marketing muscle of the NBA. The ABL couldn't compete. It folded in 1998 after just 2.5 seasons. Players lost contracts overnight. Some lost paychecks they were still owed. That's not ancient history. That's a memory that every WNBA player and every players' union rep carries into every negotiation. The knowledge that women's leagues are fragile, that they can disappear, that pushing too hard, asking for too much, could tip a league that's still finding its footing right off the edge. That fear, and it is a real justified fear, is exactly what team owners have quietly relied on for nearly 3 decades. Not maliciously, necessarily, but structurally. When you know the players are scared of the alternative, you don't have to offer much. You offer just enough to keep the league alive, just enough to keep the players from walking, and you call it progress. And for most of the WNBA's history, that calculus worked. Players accepted below-market salaries because the alternative was no salary at all. They played overseas in the off-season, in Russia, in Turkey, in China, to supplement incomes that couldn't sustain them through a full year. Some of the best players in the world were essentially working 2 jobs just to stay afloat. Breanna Stewart talked about it. Diana Taurasi talked about it. Sue Bird built a career partly on the understanding that the WNBA paycheck was never going to be enough on its own. This was normal. This was just how it worked. Until it wasn't. Here's what changed. And this is the part the league office doesn't love talking about. The WNBA's explosive growth in 2024 and 2025 didn't happen because of a new marketing strategy. It didn't happen because of a rebranding campaign or a new TV deal or a savvy ownership group. It happened because of players. Specifically, because of what Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, Paige Buchers, and a generation of college stars did to make women's basketball unmissable. They didn't just bring fans. They brought a demographic the league had been chasing for years. Younger viewers, casual sports fans, people who had never thought to tune into a WNBA game before. Sponsors followed. Networks followed. Money followed. The players created the value. The structure captured it. And now those same players are looking at half-billion-dollar franchise valuations and billion-dollar TV deals and asking, out loud, the question that ownership has always hoped they wouldn't ask. Where's our share? The WNBA Players Association has been preparing for this moment, quietly, methodically, with a focus that the previous generation players, as talented and as brave as they were, never quite had the platform to bring. Because here's what's different now. In 2020, when the last CBA was signed, the WNBA was a league trying to survive. In 2026, it is a league that cannot be ignored. That changes everything about what happens at the bargaining table. The owners can no longer point to red ink and shrug. The revenue is there. The numbers are public. The valuations are in Forbes. The players know what the league is worth, and they know what they're worth to it. But knowing your value and being paid your value are 2 very different things. And standing between the players and the payday they've earned is something far more complicated than a stubborn owner or an outdated contract. It's a system with rules, incentives, and powerful interests that was never built to reward the people at the center of it. And at the center of all of it, right now, is one name. Let's do something the league office has never done publicly. Let's actually try to calculate what Caitlin Clark is worth. Not her contract number, not her endorsement deals, her actual economic value. The money she has directly moved, generated, and created since the moment she stepped onto a WNBA court. Because once you see these numbers laid out, the conversation stops being about fairness. It becomes about something much more uncomfortable. Start with tickets. In the 2023 season, the year before Clark was drafted, the average resale price for a Fever home game was around $30. By the summer of 2024, that number had climbed to over $200 for games Clark appeared in. Road games with Fever visited, some venues saw average resale prices exceed $300 for a WNBA game. Season ticket sales for the Fever increased over 400% in a single offseason. The Indiana Fever, a team that couldn't give tickets away 2 years ago, became one of the hottest live sport experiences in the country. Now multiply that across the league. Every team that hosted the Fever saw attendance records. Every arena that welcomed Clark sold out. The away game effect, the phenomenon where a visiting star lifts the entire gate, was something the WNBA had simply never experienced at this scale before. Analysts who study sports economics estimated that Clark generated somewhere between $70 million and $100 million in additional league-wide revenue in her rookie season alone. Her salary that year, $76,151. Now look at television. Before Clark, WNBA games averaged somewhere between 200,000 and 400,000 viewers on a good night. Respectable for the league's history. Not enough to command serious network attention. Clark's WNBA debut drew 2.1 million viewers. Her games regularly pulled over 1 million, numbers that hadn't been seen in women's basketball since the peak of the old ABL era. An Indiana Fever playoff game in 2024 drew over 3 million viewers. 3 million people watching a WNBA playoff game on a weeknight. ESPN took notice. ION took notice. Amazon took notice. The media rights deal the WNBA signed, a package reportedly worth over $2 billion across multiple years, was negotiated in the shadow of Caitlin Clark's ratings. Executives at every major network knew what was driving those numbers. They weren't bidding on the WNBA in the abstract. They were bidding on the Caitlin Clark era. She didn't just boost the league's TV value. She was a reason the league had TV value worth bidding on. Then there's the franchise valuation itself. The Indiana Fever went from $90 million to $560 million. That's $470 million in new value, created in roughly 24 months. Sports economists don't attribute franchise value changes to general market trends in isolation. When one team's value jumps 500% while playing in the same city, the same arena, with the same ownership structure, and the only variable that changed was one player, the math isn't subtle. Caitlin Clark is conservatively responsible for several $100 million of that franchise appreciation. She will never see a dollar of it. This is a part of the story where people usually say, well, that's just how professional sports work. Owners take the risk. Owners reap the reward. Players get their contracted share and nothing more. And in a vacuum, that argument has logic to it. But here's where it breaks down for the WNBA specifically. In the NBA, the Players Union negotiated a deal where players receive approximately 50% of basketball-related income. The revenue split is built into the CBA. When LeBron James makes the NBA $500 million more valuable, a significant portion of that flows back to players collectively through the salary cap. In the WNBA, players receive roughly 10% of league revenue. 10%. In a league that just crossed $5 billion in total franchise value, the players are not partners in this business. They are, by the structure of the current deal, closer to contractors, valued for what they produce, but excluded from owning any piece of what they built. And Caitlin Clark, more than any player in the league's history, built something real, something worth $500 million. She knows the numbers. Her agents know the numbers. The Players Association knows the numbers, which is why what's happened behind closed doors right now, in quiet meetings between union reps and league executives, is far more significant than anything happening on the court. Picture a room. On one side of the table, the WNBA Players Association, armed with data, with ratings reports, with franchise valuation breakdowns, with the knowledge that their members just delivered the most commercially successful era in the league's history. On the other side, team owners and league executives, some of whom genuinely want to grow the sport, some of whom bought franchises as passion projects and are now sitting on assets worth 10 times what they paid, all of whom understand, on some level, that the math has shifted and that pretending otherwise is no longer an option. Between them, the next collective bargaining agreement, and the entire future of women's professional basketball. Let's meet the players in this negotiation, because this isn't just a story about Caitlin Clark. It's about a generation of athletes who arrived at exactly the right moment, with the platform, the leverage, and the public attention to actually change something. Start with the Players Association itself. The WNBPA has been quietly building toward this moment for years. They hired economists. They brought in sports business analysts. They study what the NBA Players Association did in the 1980s and 1990s, how players went from earning a tiny fraction of league revenue to becoming genuine financial partners in the business they built. They are not walking into this negotiation unprepared. Then there's the ownership landscape, and this is where it gets genuinely complicated. The WNBA has seen a wave of new ownership in the past 2 years unlike anything in its history. Billionaire investors, private equity groups, celebrity ownership consortiums. The Golden State Valkyries, backed by the Warriors ownership group, came in with a $50 million expansion fee and immediately became the league's most valuable franchise at $850 million. These are not owners who bought in to lose money slowly and call it charity. They bought in because they believe the WNBA is a growth asset, a business, and businesses that grow need to reinvest in things driving that growth, which means, for the first time, the players might actually have allies on the other side of the table. Owners who understand that paying players more isn't just the right thing to do. It's the smart business move. Higher salaries attract and retain talent. Better talent grows the product. A better product drives revenue. The math is not complicated, but not every owner sees it that way. Some of the league's older ownership groups are more resistant. They remember the years when the WNBA operated at a loss, when the NBA was essentially subsidizing the league's existence. They remember writing checks that didn't come back, and they are not eager to see salary commitments balloon before they're certain the revenue growth is permanent and not a Caitlin Clark-driven bubble. That word, bubble, is the most dangerous word in this negotiation, because if the owners can convince themselves or convince each other that what's happening right now is temporary, that it's one player, one moment, one cultural flash, then they have a reason to hold a line on salaries. To say, let's wait and see. Let's make sure this growth is real before we lock in commitments we can't walk back. And the players know that argument is coming. They've been preparing their counter for months. Here's the counter. The 2025 season, the year Clark missed 70% of games, was supposed to be the test. If the growth was a bubble, it would have deflated the moment she went down. Instead, the league grew, attendance held, ratings held, merchandise sales increased. That is not a bubble. That is a foundation. The players' argument is simple. The WNBA has crossed the threshold. The audience is here. The sponsors are here. The media deals are signed. This isn't Clark carrying the league on her back. This is a league that has genuinely arrived with or without any single player. And if that's true, if the growth is structural, not personal, then the current salary structure isn't just unfair. It's indefensible. But here's what nobody on either side of the table wants to say out loud. The CBA negotiation has a nuclear option. Players can opt out. They can refuse to sign a new deal. They can, in theory, go on strike. And a WNBA work stoppage in 2026, at the peak of the league's cultural moment, will be the most dramatic and consequential event in women's sport history. Everyone in that room knows it, which is exactly why both sides are terrified of what happens if they can't find common ground. Let's play it out. Because a WNBA work stoppage in 2026 isn't just a hypothetical. It's a scenario that sports business analysts, union insiders, and league executives are actively modeling. And the more you think through what it would actually look like, the more you understand why both sides are losing sleep over it. So let's go there. It's spring 2026. The Players Association and the league cannot reach a new CBA deal. The gap between what players are demanding and what owners are willing to offer is too wide. The opt-out clause gets triggered. The players announce they will not report to training camp. The WNBA season, scheduled to begin in May, goes dark. What happens next? First, the public reaction. And this is the part that makes this particular work stoppage unlike any in sports history. WNBA players are not faceless labor. They are among the most visible, most socially connected athletes in American sports. Caitlin Clark has tens of millions of followers across platforms. Angel Reese has built a media presence that rivals mainstream celebrities. Breanna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, Aya Wilson. These are women with voices, with audiences, and with the cultural credibility to make their case directly to the public without a press release. If they go on strike, they don't need the sports media to tell their story. They'll tell it themselves. In real time, with receipts. The franchise is worth $560 million. Here's my paycheck. You do the math. That message, delivered by Caitlin Clark to her audience of tens of millions, doesn't get buried on page 6 of the sports section. It becomes a story. Everywhere. Immediately. Now consider the sponsors. Nike, Gatorade, State Farm, Amazon. Every major brand that has attached itself to the WNBA's growth era did so because of what these players represent, not just athletically, but culturally. They are the brand. A work stoppage doesn't just pause games. It creates a PR decision for every single one of those sponsors. Do you stand with the league? Do you stand with the players? Do you go silent and hope it blows over? There is no clean answer. And brands hate not having a clean answer. Some sponsors would quietly signal support for the players. Some would pressure the league to settle fast. A prolonged stoppage would put billions of dollars in endorsement relationships under a spotlight nobody asked for. The owners know this. It's one of the reasons a strike threat carries real weight in a way it simply didn't 5 years ago. But here's the other side of it, the part that makes the player's position genuinely risky. A work stoppage also stops the paychecks of every player who isn't Caitlin Clark. The average WNBA salary, outside the top stars, is somewhere between $60,000 and $120,000 a year. For many players, that's their primary income. They don't have 8-year Nike deals to fall back on. They don't have State Farm commercials running every 15 minutes during NFL games. A long strike doesn't hurt the owners the way it hurts the players at the bottom of the roster, and the owners know that too. This is the classic asymmetry of labor negotiations in sports. The stars have leverage. The stars have platforms. The stars can survive a stoppage. But solidarity is only as strong as the weakest link. And in the WNBA, there are a lot of players for whom missing even one paycheck is a genuine hardship. The league strategy, if it comes to a standoff, will almost certainly involve waiting, letting the financial pressure build, betting that the players at the bottom of rosters eventually break ranks. It has worked before in other leagues, in other eras, which is exactly why the Players Association's strongest card isn't the strike threat itself. It's the public narrative around the strike threat. If this becomes a story about billionaire owners hoarding the value that working athletes created, and with a $560 million franchise valuation sitting right there in the headlines, it very easily could, then the owners aren't just in a labor dispute, they're in a PR catastrophe. The court of public opinion in 2026 does not look kindly on that story, and Caitlin Clark, whether she intends to be or not, is the most powerful narrator that story has ever had. So both sides are rational. Both sides understand the risks. Both sides have reasons to settle. But settlements require compromise. And compromise requires someone to move first. So far, nobody has moved. Part 7 of 10. Caitlin Clark turned a dead franchise into $560 million. So why is her paycheck a joke? WNBA sports commentary. 750 words, the most powerful silence in sports. Caitlin Clark does not say much about her contract. In press conferences, she deflects. In interviews, she pivots. When reporters push, and they do push, she smiles, gives something diplomatic, and moves the conversation back to basketball. Some people read that as indifference. Some read it as naivety. Some read it as a young athlete who hasn't yet found her voice on the big issues. They are all wrong. What Caitlin Clark is doing is one of the most sophisticated pieces of public positioning in modern sports. And once you see it clearly, you cannot unsee it. Think about what she is not doing. She is not publicly criticizing the league that employs her. She is not torching the owners who control her contract. She is not positioning herself as a martyr or a crusader or a symbol of systemic injustice. Even though the numbers would absolutely support that framing, she is instead doing something far more strategic. She is letting everyone else make the argument for her. Every time a reporter writes a story about the gap between her basketball salary and the franchise value she created, Clark doesn't have to say a word. The story writes itself. The outrage generates itself. The public pressure builds itself. Every time a fan does the math, $560 million franchise, $76,000 salary, and posts it on social media, Clark's silence becomes louder than any statement she could have released through a publicist. This is a lesson that the most effective labor negotiators in history figured out a long time ago. The person who speaks first in a public dispute usually loses, because speaking first means committing to a position. It means giving the other side something to respond to. It means entering a conversation on someone else's terms. Clark hasn't entered the conversation. She's letting the conversation surround her. And from that position, quiet, composed, universally admired, her leverage grows every single day. But there's a harder dimension to this silence, one that doesn't get talked about enough. Caitlin Clark is white, and the WNBA is a league with a vast majority of players. The players who have been fighting for better pay for decades before Clark arrived are black women. That reality sits underneath every conversation about Clark's salary, her impact, and her public positioning. And it creates a tension that is as important as any CBA clause. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. The pay gap that Clark is now famous for experiencing is not new. Aya Wilson was a reigning two-time MVP before Clark was drafted. Breanna Stewart was a two-time champion and one of the most decorated players in league history. Diana Taurasi built a career that most male Hall of Famers would envy. None of them moved the commercial needle the way Clark has. Not because they were lesser players. They weren't. But because the American sports media, the American sponsorship market, and the American casual fan base responded to Clark in a way they never responded to her predecessors. And those predecessors noticed. Early in Clark's rookie season, there was friction, on-court physicality that some read as hazing, others as competitive basketball, others as something more pointed. Veteran players making clear that stardom in college didn't automatically transfer to respect in the pros. Some of it was genuine competitive culture. Some of it was something else. A frustration that a player who had been in the league for 5 minutes was getting more media attention, more sponsor money, and more public sympathy than women who had spent careers building something the world was only now noticing. That tension was real. It was discussed, debated, and dissected across every sports media platform for months. And Clark navigated it. Carefully, quietly, without throwing anyone under the bus, without weaponizing her platform against her own teammates. That choice, the choice to absorb the friction rather than escalate it, may have been the most important thing she did in her entire rookie year. Because if Clark had come out swinging, if she had positioned herself as a savior surrounded by jealous veterans, she would have fractured the one thing that makes her labor leverage meaningful: solidarity. A players' union only works if the players are unified. And in the WNBA right now, the most famous player in the league is one who has consistently, carefully, and deliberately chosen not to make herself bigger than the collective. That is not weakness. That is the smartest play on the board, and the owners know it, which is why the one thing they are most afraid of isn't a strike announcement or a public statement or a viral social media moment. It's Caitlin Clark walking into union meeting, sitting down and saying 2 words: "I'm in,"